Hello Internet, welcome to Tegco, where we take apart things and also teach you how to fix them. Let's get started. So today we're actually going to be discussing, well, not necessarily discussing, but I'm actually going to be showing you a fix to the fabled left Joycon disconnect. Alright, so obviously you're going to be needing a couple things. First off, you're going to need a left Joycon that's actually defective. Next, you're going to need so you're going to be needing a couple tools. First off, a good screwdriver set. Now you want to have the tri-wing, preferably a 2.0. Though the funny thing is, it is slightly smaller than a 2.0. It's actually a 1.5, but 2s do work. Next, you're also going to be needing a very, very tiny Phillips. This is what we call a micro Phillips. Next, you're going to be needing a wire stripper. This guy can cut wires and also strip wires. Of course, you're probably not going to have one of these around. This guy was ordered from Snap-on, and they no longer make this guy. So, I'd recommend going to Home Depot or Canadian Tire, picking up one of these guys. Next on your list, you're going to be needing this guy. This guy is a soldering iron. Now, the tools that I'm using, I did actually link down in the link below with one of my sellers that actually sells it for pretty cheap and is also very good. Alright, so first off, we're going to be taking apart the Joycon. You got 4 screws over, one over here, one over here, one over here, and also. Alright, so obviously the first thing you're going to want to do is disconnect the battery. Now, why do you do that? Well, first off, because it's a very shocking experience if you end up being shocked. And another reason is because it's kind of in the way. So to remove the battery, you're actually going to take the wire and pull up on it. Now this will actually disconnect the battery completely. And there we go. The battery is disconnected. Now we just basically unseat it from the actual battery seat. Next, we're going to need that small little Phillips. And we got 3 screws that we have to remove. So we're looking at the Joycon. Pull that out. You got 1, 2, 3 screws that we do have to remove. This removes this plastic paneling that's over top of everything. This guy over here is your Bluetooth encoder chip. This is what actually creates a signal and also communicates back with a switch. We follow this wire down all the way, and it goes down to this portion over here. This portion of the PCB is what is modified as the antenna. However, the problem is that it commonly gets cut out when you end up having your hands all over the switch Joycon. And that's where you get the disconnect. So how we're going to actually fix that is we're not necessarily going to be cutting any traces or anything like that. We're actually going to be using a part of the controller that's already part of it. Now we take a look over here at this particular part over here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to solder a wire, and that's going to act as our antenna. Alright, so the first thing that you're going to want to do, originally I did want to create a separate video on how to solder properly. I'm probably going to be doing a video eventually. But to give you a basic idea on how to solder properly, first thing you're going to be doing with your soldering iron, once it's reached optimal temperature, we're going to do what's called tinning the tip. This basically means that we're going to be putting solder on the tip. That way it doesn't cause any damage to our electrical components that we're going to be soldering. So next, what we need is a small length of wire. Now what I would recommend, use copper because it's readily available, and at the same time doesn't have the same degradation that aluminum does. So we're going to basically take our copper wire and just strip off a little bit. Being very careful only to actually strip it off, not completely clear cut like what I just did. It's one thing working with very, very tiny wires. There we are. So you want a little bit of wires exposed like that. So what we're going to do next is we're going to tin these guys. So we have 2 options. First off, we have the traditional method, which is just heating it up and waiting for the solder to melt. Now, what is the proper technique is waiting for the solder to actually melt over the copper rather than having to actually just simply coat it in solder. Trying to paint it on doesn't make a secure connection, and this defeats the whole purpose of it actually being soldered in the first place, and it just doesn't work out very well. Now another option is you can use this guy over here. This guy is called flux. So what it essentially does is it basically heats up incredibly quickly and basically brings the solder on. So after you've started to tin the tip, next you're going to want to loosen up the solder at that soldering point on the Joycon, and that's where we're actually going to connect it. We're going to have the antenna going all the way down over here, and preferably you want it just long enough so that it wraps around this screw hole over here. So when you're done, you should have something like this, where the wire is actually held in place. You want to go underneath this guy, and you want it to be about where that screw hole is.